Good afternoon. Today our guest is member of the European Parliament and EU's Turkey rapporteur, Ms. Kati Piri. And we will discuss with Ms. Piri her recent draft report and the near future of European Union and Turkey relations. So Ms. Piri is in Brussels at the moment, so we will have our conversation through Skype. Hello, Ms. Piri.
Hello to everyone.
So, as I mentioned, we're going to discuss the near future of the European Union and Turkey relations. But first of all, if you don't mind, let's start with the recent developments concerning the EU-Turkey relations. After the political monitoring decision of the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, a meeting of 28 EU foreign ministers was held last week in Malta. And after the meeting, EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, said we would be happy to have Turkey in. And that created an optimistic atmosphere on the government side. So in the light of what were discussed in the meeting, what would be the reason of this optimistic atmosphere?
Well, I mean, I don't share, to be honest, the optimistic assessment that was mentioned by Federica Mogherini. What I see is that the EU is not taking a stance when it comes to the deterioration of fundamental rights in Turkey. And with this statement, she left a lot of people in the cold, who also in Turkey, millions of people believe that the country is not going in the right direction. You could see it with the referendum. And for me, this statement was not very helpful, because we all know that Turkey at this moment, if the new constitution will be implemented, it will not comply with the Copenhagen criteria. With such a constitution, Turkey cannot become a member of the EU. And I would expect from a European Union who believes in shared values that we also send that message to Turkey. For me, the Turkish population, Turkey is a candidate country. I would wish a joint future between Turkey and EU, but it has to be based on respecting the same values. And if that is not happening, I expect the European Union to speak up clearly. And this is not what Federica Mogherini has done last weekend, and that's why I'm quite disappointed in that reaction.
In the same statement, Ms. Mogherini also said, we respect the results of the referendum, even if we acknowledge that there are appeals ongoing or foreseen. Based on what Ms. Mogherini said, can we understand that the European Union accepts the results of the referendum without any reserve?
Well, there have been various statements. Just a week before, immediately after the referendum, there was also a statement by Mrs. Mogherini, a written statement, which says that we expect that the alleged fraud or the alleged misconduct which happened on the election day will be independently investigated. And she had also said that we expect that the recommendations made by the international observers will be respected by the Turkish government. So it's a bit strange 1 week later to come with a different statement. And I think I think everyone knows that the lead up to the referendum, the electoral campaign, was not fair, with most media in the hands of the government, with some opposition leaders in jail, with the intimidation of people who voted no. It's clear that the ongoing campaign was not equal to the no campaigners and the yes campaigners. We have questions about what happened on election day, especially the decision of the High Election Council, where a lot of unstamped ballots, 1.5 million allegedly, have been counted in, which is against the law, the Turkish law on elections. So, you know, the question is not so much about recognizing it or not. I think we all know if this election would have been free, if this election would have been fair, there would have been a majority in Turkey saying no to this constitution.
So let's talk about your report. Yesterday, the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee debated your draft report. And the most striking part of your draft report was the fact that you underline that the constitutional amendments do not respect fundamental principles of the separation of powers and sufficient checks and balances, and are not in line with Copenhagen criteria, And moreover, you call on the Commission and the Member States to suspend the accession talks with Turkey if the constitutional package is implemented unchanged. So first of all, could you please explain us how the debate was and what were the main points that were discussed during the meeting?
I think yesterday morning, what you see is that whether you belong to the Swedish left or whether you belong to the Spanish right, everyone in Europe is very concerned about a country which has so much when it comes to the education of its population, when it comes to its economy, when we see the reforms that have been made over a period of the last 15 years, and how we see in a couple of years' time, and especially during the last 12 months, how the country is backsliding, not just from the EU, but I think from the country that a lot of Turkish people would like it to be. So the concerns are shared among all the political groups. There's no one who thinks that Turkey is heading into a good direction. Then, of course, there are political differences. There are those people who already in 2004 don't think that Turkey should become a member of the EU, no matter what Turkey does. They can have various reasons for it. Some people say, some Christian Democrats say that it would be too difficult to integrate a country with 70 million people. Some people say it's bordering countries like Syria, Iraq. You know, the EU should not expand that far. So there are various reasons. And these are the people who now say, and are hiding also partly behind human rights in Turkey by saying we should not even give the candidate status anymore to Turkey. We should look for a different partnership. I'm not belonging to that group of people. I think the Turkish population is, and for me, there always will be a candidate to become a member of the European Union. But I think many Democrats in Turkey also agree that this government is doing nothing to bring the country closer to the European Union. It's actually doing things which bring it much further away from the European Union. And then it's a question of credibility. In this accession process, it says if there's an infringement on fundamental rights for a period of time, it should lead to the suspension of the talks. And I think this is, if you believe that the values of the EU are serious, then you have to take a stance here. And that is the reason why I call for the suspension of the talk. It doesn't mean that Turkey is no longer a candidate, but it shows, because we are conducting negotiations with the government, with this government and with such a constitution, Turkey cannot become a member of the EU. So at least with this government, we have to stop the talks about integration.
As you may know, yesterday European Commissioner Johannes Hahn gave an interview to Reuters. Everybody is clear that currently at least Turkey is moving away from a European perspective, Hahn said. And Ankara has to be something else. We have to see what could be done in the future to see if we can start some kind of cooperation, he added. So how would you evaluate the comment made by Mr. Hahn? What kind of a cooperation he's talking about?
I mean, look, even if we would suspend the accession talks, where I don't agree that we should look in general for Turkey for a package outside of the accession. But even if we would suspend the accession talks, it doesn't mean we don't suddenly have to cooperate with the Turkish government. And we need to cooperate. We have so many joint interests. When it comes to trade, our economies are so intertwined. When it comes to the fight against terrorism, when it comes to solving the war in Syria, I'm not claiming that we shouldn't cooperate. I'm claiming we shouldn't integrate at this moment with this government. So, and then, of course, you already indicated, you have on the one hand Federica Mogherini with her statement. You have on the other hand Mr. Hahn, Commissioner Hahn, with another statement. So I'm sad to see that the EU cannot come up with a joint approach, which is, if fundamental rights are breached and if this new constitution is implemented without taking into account the concerns also raised by the Venice Commission, Council of Europe, European Parliament, there's no other way than to stop talks about integration. But I think we all have to be realistic. Of course, you will always have to cooperate with Turkey. But the difference between the statement of Commissioner Hahn and me is, I don't believe that we should go to a cooperation which has no attention for human rights. It cannot be a value-based transactional relationship. So, for instance, when it comes to upgrade of the customs union, which I'm in favor of, I think it would be good for the Turkish economy. But this is where the leverage of the EU is, and this is where we have to insist on political benchmarks which the country has to meet in order to upgrade the customs union.
Another statement was given by President Erdogan yesterday, as you know, and you also replied to this statement to German Die Welt, I think. But yes. I'm going to ask you again. He said, from now on, there is no option other than opening the chapters you have not yet opened. If you do not open them, goodbye, he said. So how would you comment on what Mr. Erdogan said?
Well, instead of immediately throwing the ball back, let me first react to the EU mistakes. I think over the since we started accessions, I have always been in favor of opening the chapters on fundamental rights and rule of law. Because I think we can only have influence if you actually put the things on the table and discuss it. But you know, also because of the Cyprus problem, because there needs to be unanimity on opening each chapter, this was unfortunately not possible. But if we look at where Turkey is today, even for opening chapters, you have to meet so-called opening benchmarks, like a minimum before you can negotiate about it. And Turkey at this moment will not meet any of the opening benchmarks to actually open a chapter on fundamental rights. So this story, unfortunately, is over. There's no way that the EU can open chapters at this moment if there's no improvement in fundamental rights in Turkey. And this message has already been clearly communicated in December by the EU member states. There's not one country out of the 28 who is now in favor of opening chapters. And if Mr. Erdogan, if the president would really be interested in this accession process, he hasn't proved it in the last 3 years. Tell me which recommendation by either the EU or which recommendation by the Council of Europe has the Turkish government implemented because they take the process seriously.
So you already answered to this question, but I would like to ask you more concretely again. What's the next step? What kind of a relationship is expected to be built in the near future, in the very near future?
In the very near future, things will remain very tense and difficult if we don't see some signals of improvement in Turkey. Today we have World Press Freedom Day. At the moment when there are more than 150 journalists in jail. For instance, yesterday we had an event here with some of the family members of the Cumhuriyet journalists. Give the signal, if you really take it seriously, release the journalists. If you take the process seriously and you care about your European perspective, stop the state of emergency. If you take it serious, release Demirtas, who is an opposition leader. I mean, we have to see signals from Turkey that they're really serious about this European perspective before we can also engage in a positive talk. Now, I think we should always have the dialogue. So I welcome when there are meetings with the Turkish government and EU officials. I don't think there can be meetings enough. So it's good that Turkey wants the summit. It's good because we need a dialogue. We cannot just do it over press releases. We need to see if the Turkish government is serious, if the president is serious, that he wants the EU accession process. It's also time he gives the signal, indeed, that he wants to take this up. And there's no country which can blackmail itself into the European Union, nor can the Turkish government.
After the Malta meeting, Foreign Minister Mr. Mevlut Çavuşoğlu talked about a big summit to be held with EU officials after the NATO meeting on May 24th, 25th in Brussels. So can we say that in this big summit, the near future of EU-Turkey relations and the steps that you just talked about will be on the table?
Well, a big summit is not yet on the table, as you know. It's a wish of the Turkish government. And I, in principle, support that because there's nothing wrong with talking. It doesn't always have to be a pleasant talk. a pleasant conversation. But what has been agreed now, as far as I know, is that end of May, after the NATO summit, there will be a meeting with President Tusk, President Juncker, and President Erdogan, which I think is good, because as you know, there hasn't been a personal meeting actually since the summer, what happened on 15th of July. So I think it's high time that this meeting takes place. I'm in favor of a summit between EU countries and Turkey. I think we should actually organize twice a year, that we always hold the EU-Turkey summit, not only when there is a crisis. But I also see that with the member states, you have to realize during the electoral campaign in Turkey, in the run-up to the referendum, a lot of damage has been caused. The president's remarks, calling some EU member states Nazi remnants, talking about Nazi practices, has really put not just the public opinion, but also the credibility of the Turkish government as a political partner into question. So the message I'm trying to give is that the Turkish government has to show that it wants to have a strong political tie with Europe before also the Europeans can give the same signals. The willingness is there because everyone realizes that Turkey is important and we are on the same continent, so we need to have a good cooperation there, but there are limits, and the Turkish government is very much looking for the limits in its relationship.
So, Ms. Piri, I would like to ask you one last personal question. You know Turkey very well. You have visited Turkey many times. You have a lot of friends here, and I know that many journalists that you know in person are in jail now. What are your own feelings about Turkey and the recent developments?
I mean, first of all, when I started as rapporteur 3 years ago in this European Parliament, I would have never guessed that Turkey would come to the point where we are now. And that makes me extremely sad, because I got to know the Turkish people as not only a fantastic population, but I also see the strength of civil society. And I know that there are many people in Turkey who are also not happy with the developments in their country and who want to have a good relationship with the European Union. So that makes me sad. But it's also hopeful to see the resistance of Democrats in Turkey. And today, when we think about all those journalists, not just the ones in jail, many who have been fired, many people who are working under high pressure just for doing their job. These are not just professionals. They're also people who have families. They are the brothers and sisters of people, the mothers and fathers. They have neighbors. They have friends. And it's very sad to see what is happening to a lot of people in Turkey nowadays. And I just hope that I can show the solidarity with all those people who are fighting on a daily basis for the future of their country. And this is a fight that every Democrat should engage with. And I can just say that from the European Parliament, we will not leave the Turkish population by itself, and we will always have an open door for Turkey, for Turkey's people.
Thank you very much, Ms. Piri. It was really nice talking to you and hearing your comments.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So we spoke with Ms. Piri, who is Turkey rapporteur of the European Union. We discussed the recent developments and the near future of EU-Turkey relations. Thanks for watching us.